Hi, let us discuss the technical aspects of constructors in C++. So in this video, we focus on these three segments. The first segment focus on what a constructor is and its properties. The second segment deals with the types of constructor based on the arguments. And the third segment discuss on sample programs to illustrate all the aspects we have learned. Constructor. So constructors are said to be special member functions. The reason why it is specially considered is these constructors need not to be invoked explicitly by the developer. We all know that a member functions has to be invoked explicitly by the instance of its class. But in case of constructor, no need to explicitly invoke these member functions. Instead, they are implicitly invoked whenever an instance of the class gets created. The name of the constructor has to be the name same as the class. Unlike other member functions, a constructor does not return anything, and even it is not considered as a void. Whereas a constructor may or may not accept arguments. The functionality of a constructor is it constructs the instance of a class as well as it allocates memory for all the data members defined in that class, and if required, it initializes those member functions. Regarding the overloading nature, the constructor can be overloaded. It means a class may contain more than one constructor, and whenever an object gets created, the constructor which match with the number of arguments, the type of arguments defined along with the object gets invoked. Types of constructor. Based on the number and type of arguments, constructors are classified as default constructor and parameterized constructor. Default constructor. A default constructor does not contains any arguments. It accepts no arguments. A sample code, let's have a look on the sample code. We have defined a class as myClass. The class myClass contains two member variables, ival1, ival2 of type integer, and are declared as public. The class also contains a member functions. The name of the member function, have a look. The name of the member function is same as the name of the class. And regarding the arguments, the constructor accepts no arguments. Say default constructor is defined here. If a constructor is defined with no arguments, then that constructor will be considered as a default constructor. So in this example, the default constructor, it initializes an integer literals 10 to the member ival1 and 20 to the member ival2. The class also contains a member functions display which returns and accepts nothing, and the behavior of that member function just displays the values of the members ival1 and ival2. In the main function, we instantiate the class, and the name of the instance we defined is obj1. So as we discussed in the previous slide, whenever object gets created, a constructor will be invoked implicitly. So when obj1 gets created, the default constructor will be invoked implicitly, and the member variables ival1 and ival2 will be assigned with the integer literals 10 and 20 respectively. The next statement, we make use of the instance to call the non-member function, the member function display, which displays the value of ival1 and ival2. The next category is parameterized constructor. So a parameterized constructor accepts arguments, and that argument will be mostly used to initialize the member variables of a class. Similar to a default constructor, a parameterized constructor also gets invoked implicitly whenever the instance of the class gets created. Have a look on the sample code we defined. We have defined a class with the name myClass. We have two member variables ival1 and ival2 of type integer and the public scope. The class contains a constructor defined myClass which accepts two arguments x and y of type integer. In the previous example, we had a constructor with no arguments, but whereas in this case we have a constructor defined with the two arguments, and these two arguments are gets assigned to the member variables ival1 and ival2 respectively. X gets initialized to ival1 and y gets initialized to ival2. The class also contains a member function display which accepts and displays nothing. The behavior of the member function display is it just displays the values of ival1 and ival2. Inside the main function, we instantiate the class, and the name of the instance we used is obj2, and that statement contains two arguments 100 and 200. So here a matching constructor is searched. In our code we have defined a constructor with arguments x and y, and now here 100 will be assigned to x and 200 will be assigned to y, and x gets assigned to ival1 and y gets assigned to ival2. We have a statement obj2.display which calls the member function display, and that function displays the value of ival1 and ival2. The right hand side box shows what the output will be when this code gets executed. And these are the references which gives theoretical aspects of what a constructor is. Thank you.